Good evening, Blackpine. Eddie Franklin here, and it's Sunday, November 4th, 2007, and the time is just past 10 o'clock. The festival's over, Halloween's come and gone, and we're back to our regular Sunday night routine up here in the attic. It's gotten colder this week. We're down to 38 degrees tonight, and I can feel winter starting to creep in. The fog's back, too, not as thick as it was a couple weeks ago, but enough that everything outside looks a little softer, a little more distant. My wife made chili for dinner tonight, which tells you everything you need to know about what season we're in. When the chili comes out, winter's not far behind. Halloween was Wednesday, and it was a good one from what I saw. We had a steady stream of trick-or-treaters, probably 30 or 40 kids over the course of the evening. Superheroes, princesses, ghosts made out of bedsheets, one kid dressed as a very convincing scarecrow. My wife went through 3 bags of candy, and we still have leftovers, which suits me fine. I've been eating mini Snickers bars all week. The weather cooperated too, which doesn't always happen on Halloween. It was cold but clear, no rain, and the kids could actually enjoy themselves without freezing or getting soaked. I sat on the porch for a while handing out candy, watching the little ones waddle up the walkway in their costumes, and it reminded me why I like living here. Everyone knows everyone, parents chat while their kids collect candy. The whole thing feels safe and warm even when it's cold outside. So that was Halloween. Now we're into November properly, and things are going to quiet down until Thanksgiving. The leaves are mostly gone now, just a few stubborn ones still clinging to branches. The town feels like it's settling in for winter, getting ready for the cold months ahead. Tonight I've got news from the week, your letters, and I'm going to tell you the full story of how the old cinema came to be and why it sat empty for nearly 40 years before someone brought it back to life. Plus, I'll teach you about Granny Smith apples and where they came from, which is a better story than you might expect. Let's get started. Not a lot of major news this week. Things have quieted down after the festival and Halloween, which is probably what everyone needs. The town feels like it's taking a collective breath before the holidays start. The watermill cleanup happened yesterday, Saturday, November 3rd, like they planned. Good turnout, maybe 25 or 30 people, showed up with gloves and boots ready to work. They spent most of the day clearing debris, cutting back overgrowth, hauling out rotted wood and broken equipment. Sweet and Tart provided lunch like they promised, sandwiches and soup, which was much appreciated given how cold it was. Mayor Hutchins says they made good progress. The structural engineer is scheduled to come out next week to assess the building and give them a report on whether it's salvageable. No promises yet on what happens after that, but at least now they can get a proper look at what they're working with. Blackpine High had their game Friday night, home against Lincoln. The Pioneers won again, 28-17. Michael Dawes scored twice, bringing his season total to 12 touchdowns, and Tommy Brennan had a rushing touchdown in the third quarter that sealed the win. The team just keeps going. If they win next week's game against Ridgemont, they'll make it to the regional playoffs, which would be the first time in about 6 years. The whole town's getting excited about it. The library's back to normal hours now, Tuesday through Saturday 9 to 6, and Thursdays until 7. Dorothy says the fall reading program ends this week, so if you're still working on your 5 books, you've got until Saturday to finish. The drawing for the prize basket is next Tuesday, November 13th, around noon at the library. The old cinema finished up their horror marathon last weekend. Claire says attendance was excellent all month. Psycho, The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, and Night of the Living Dead all drew good crowds. This month they're doing a different theme, classic westerns. Starting next weekend with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Then High Noon, Shane, and finishing up with The Searchers. Showtimes are Friday and Saturday at 7, Sunday matinee at 3. And here's something interesting. The bear sightings have stopped completely. Sheriff Dawes thinks the bear is probably denned up for winter by now, which makes sense given how cold it's gotten. Black bears usually go into hibernation sometime in November, find a cave or a hollow tree, or dig themselves a den, and sleep through until spring. So if you were worried about running into a bear on the hiking trails, you can relax. He's sleeping. All right, folks, that was all for our news segment. Let me get to some announcements, and then we'll take a break. The Community Center is starting up winter knitting classes. Beginners are welcome, and it starts next Thursday, November 8th at 6 p.m. They'll teach you basic stitches, how to read patterns, all the fundamentals. Classes run for 6 weeks, and by the end, you should be able to knit yourself a scarf or a hat just in time for the coldest part of winter. Materials list is posted at the Community Center, or you can call, and they'll tell you what you need to bring. My wife's been knitting for years and swears by it. Says it's relaxing, meditative almost. If you've ever wanted to learn, now's your chance. Miller's Market has their Thanksgiving turkey order form available now. If you want to reserve a fresh turkey for Thanksgiving, you need to fill out the form by November 15th. They're also doing a special on cranberry sauce and stuffing mix this week, in case you're one of those people who plans ahead. The church is organizing their annual canned food drive for Thanksgiving. They're collecting non-perishable items through November 18th. Canned vegetables, soup, pasta, rice, anything that keeps. Drop-off is at the church during office hours, or you can leave donations in the box by the main entrance. Everything goes to families in need for the holiday. And my wife wanted me to mention that the Blackpine Community Choir is starting rehearsals for their Christmas concert. They're looking for new members, especially men. Apparently, they're heavy on sopranos and altos and light on tenors and basses. Rehearsals are Wednesday evenings at 7 at the church. You don't need to be a great singer, just willing to show up and try. My wife's been in the choir for 3 years now and loves it, though I maintain that I have no business singing in public. Okay, that's the announcements. If you've got something you want mentioned next week, write to P.O. Box 147. You know the drill. All righty, I'm going to step away for a minute. When I come back, I'll tell you about the old cinema and how it came to be. Back in a moment. The house is quiet tonight. My wife's already gone to bed. She was tired from being at the mill cleanup all day yesterday, came home exhausted and sore. I should probably be in bed too, but this is my favorite hour of the week, sitting up here talking to you folks. There's something about Sunday nights that feels right for this. All right, tonight I want to tell you about the old cinema on Maple Street. Some of you have been going there for years, some of you went this past month for the horror marathon, and some of you might have noticed they just installed new digital projectors. But I'm guessing most people don't know the full story of how that building came to be, and why it sat empty for nearly 40 years before someone brought it back to life. It starts in 1915 with a man named Harrison Webb. Webb was a lumber mill owner from Portland, not from Blackpine originally, but he had business interests here during the logging boom. He'd made a fortune in timber, and unlike a lot of wealthy men at the time who just accumulated money, Webb had a genuine passion for something, film. He'd seen movies in San Francisco, in New York, in the big cities where cinema was starting to take off, and he believed, really believed, that film was the future of entertainment. He thought it was art, thought it was important, and he wanted to bring it to places like Blackpine, not just for himself, but for everyone. So in 1915, Webb built the old cinema on Maple Street, and he didn't build it halfway. He built it properly. Velvet curtains, real theater seats ordered from back east, a small chandelier in the lobby that looked like something out of a fancy hotel. The building was beautiful, much fancier than anything else in town at the time. It must have cost him a fortune. His vision was ambitious, movies every week, maybe even twice a week. He wanted to turn Blackpine into a place where people could experience culture, where they didn't have to travel to Portland to see the latest films. He wanted to make Blackpine special. The cinema opened in spring of 1915 with a Charlie Chaplin short. The whole town came out for it. packed the place, standing room only. People dressed up for it like it was a special occasion, because it was. Blackpine had never had anything like this before. By all accounts, it was magical. The lights dimmed, the projector whirred to life, and for the first time, people in this little mountain town watched moving pictures on a big screen. But here's where the dream ran into reality. In 1915, getting film reels to a small, remote mountain town was incredibly difficult and expensive. Movies had to be shipped by rail to the nearest station, then transported by wagon up into the mountains. Film distributors charged huge fees for rural locations because it wasn't worth their trouble for small audiences, and Webb needed a trained projectionist, someone who knew how to operate the equipment, how to handle the delicate film reels. And those people were hard to find and expensive to keep on staff. Webb tried. He really did. He paid the fees. He hired the projectionist. He kept the place running. But maintaining weekly showings proved impossible. Some weeks, the film reels didn't arrive on time. Some weeks, the projectionist was sick or quit or couldn't make it up the mountain. Some weeks, there just weren't enough people in town to justify the cost. By 1917, they were only showing films once a month if they were lucky. The costs were astronomical, and the logistics were a nightmare. Webb was spending more money than he could ever make back, even with a full house every time. Then, in 1918, Harrison Webb died. Spanish flu. Same epidemic that killed millions of people worldwide. He was only in his 50s. His family back in Portland inherited everything, including the cinema, but they had no interest in running a movie theater in a remote logging town. They'd never shared Webb's vision, never understood why he cared so much about bringing film to Blackpine. So they closed it, locked the doors, left the seats and the curtains and the chandelier, and walked away. For the next 38 years, that beautiful building sat empty. Oh, it got used occasionally, town meetings when the weather was bad, storage for this or that, a place for kids to sneak into and look around, but mostly it just sat there, slowly deteriorating. The velvet curtains faded and collected dust, the chandelier tarnished. The seats started falling apart. Rain leaked through the roof. By the 1950s, it was an eyesore, a reminder of a grand idea that had failed. Then, in 1956, a couple named Vincent and Marie Pastore moved to Blackpine. Vincent had been a projectionist in Seattle for 20 years, loved film just as much as Harrison Webb had, but he understood the practical side of it in a way Webb maybe hadn't. He'd worked in theaters his whole adult life, knew the business, knew what it took to actually make it work. When Vincent and Marie saw that empty building on Maple Street, they saw potential. By the 1950s, things had changed. Film distribution was easier and cheaper. Technology was better and more reliable. Blackpine had grown since 1915, not huge, but enough, and Vincent knew how to run a theater on a budget, how to make it sustainable. They bought the building for practically nothing. Nobody else wanted it, and spent the next year refurbishing it. They couldn't afford to restore it to its original grandeur, and honestly, they didn't need to. They replaced what was broken, cleaned what could be saved, modernized what needed modernizing. They made it functional. The Pastore Cinema reopened in 1957. Vincent ran the projector himself. Marie sold tickets and snacks, and they showed films every Friday and Saturday night. Nothing fancy, whatever they could get their hands on, whatever people wanted to see, some new releases, some older films, whatever worked. And it worked. The town supported it. People came, not packed houses every night like that first magical showing in 1915, but steady attendance. Enough to keep the lights on, enough to make a living, enough to matter. Vincent and Marie ran it for decades. When they got older and couldn't manage it anymore, their son Anthony took over in the early 90s. Anthony did another round of refurbishing in 1994. New seats, better sound system, fixed the roof properly, kept the vintage charm, but modernized where it counted. Anthony's still running it now in 2007. He just installed those new digital projectors, finally retiring the 35mm equipment his father used. He shows classic films mostly, the horror marathon this past month, westerns this month, special events throughout the year. It's not a moneymaker, but it's surviving. And that's more than most small-town theaters can say these days. So the old cinema has been standing on Maple Street for 92 years now. 18 years of ambitious glory under Harrison Webb, 38 years of abandonment and decay, and 50 years of modest, sustainable success under the Pastor family. I love that story because it shows two different approaches to the same dream. Webb had vision and passion and money, but he tried to force something that the time and place couldn't support. The Pastores had vision and passion too, but they also had patience and practicality. They waited for the right time, they built something sustainable, and they've kept it alive ever since. Harrison Webb's dream didn't fail. It just took 40 years and a different family to make it work. Next time you're at the old cinema watching a movie, think about that. Think about Webb building something beautiful that was ahead of its time, and think about the Pastores bringing it back to life decades later. Both of them loved film enough to try, and because of them, we still have a place to watch movies in Blackpine. All right, that's the cinema story. Let me take another break, and when I come back, I'll get to your letters. Back in a moment. November always feels like a pause to me. The excitement of October is over. The festival, Halloween, all that energy. And now we're in this quiet space before the holidays really kick in. Thanksgiving's a few weeks away, Christmas after that. But right now it's just November, cold and dark and quiet. I don't mind it, honestly. After the bustle of October, it's nice to have some calm. All right, letters. P.O. Box 147, Blackpine. Let's see what we've got this week. First up, a letter from Sarah. Eddy, I wanted to write and say thank you for doing the show. My husband and I moved to Blackpine 3 months ago from California. We don't know many people yet, and it's been hard adjusting to small-town life after living in a city for so long. But listening to your show on Sunday nights has helped us feel more connected to this place. Hearing the town news, the stories, the history, it's helping us understand where we've moved to and what this community is about. So thank you. We're starting to feel like we might actually belong here. Sarah, thank you for writing, and welcome to Blackpine. Moving to a new place is always hard, especially when you're going from city life to small-town life. Those are very different worlds, and the adjustment takes time. 3 months isn't very long. Give it a year, give it 2 years, and I think you'll find you're more settled than you feel right now. The fact that you're listening to local radio, that you're paying attention to the town and its history, that tells me you're trying. That matters. Keep showing up, keep being part of things, and eventually this place will start to feel like home. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. I'm glad the show's helping. That's exactly what it's for. Connecting people to this place, to each other, to the stories that make Blackpine what it is. Stick with it, Sarah. You and your husband are going to be fine. Next one here. This is interesting. Let me read this. Eddy, I've been working on a concept for the past few years that I'd like to share. It's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, digital currency that doesn't require banks or governments to operate. It would use cryptographic proof instead of trust in institutions, and it would be maintained by a distributed network of computers. Transactions would be verified by network nodes and recorded in a public ledger. The system would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. I'm still working out the technical details, but I think it could change how we think about money and financial systems. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. The letter is signed Satoshi. Well, Satoshi, I have to be honest with you. I read this twice, and I'm not entirely sure I understand what you're describing. Digital currency that exists without banks? Money maintained by computers? Cryptographic proof instead of trust? Is this a prank? I might be getting on in years, but I can usually tell when someone's pulling my leg. This sounds like science fiction to me. Money that only exists on computers, that governments don't control, that banks don't handle. How would that even work? What happens when the power goes out? What happens when your computer crashes? I'm not trying to be dismissive, Satoshi, but I've been using paper money and coins my whole life, and it works fine. People have been using physical currency for thousands of years. I'm not sure folks are ready to trust money that they can't hold in their hands, that only exists as, what? Data? Numbers on a screen? But maybe I'm just old-fashioned. I still use a rotary phone in my kitchen, so what do I know about the future of technology? If you really believe in this idea, I hope it works out for you. Though I have to say, if this digital currency of yours ever becomes worth $5, I'll be genuinely impressed. Good luck with your project, Satoshi. You've certainly got ambition, I'll give you that. Let's move on to the next letter. Eddy, can you help me find my friend Mike Roch? We used to work together at the mill, but he switched to a construction job in town about 6 months ago, and I haven't seen him around. Mike Roch, if you're listening, this is Johnson. We need to catch up, man. Give me a call. Well, that's nice. 6 months working different jobs, different schedules, and you lose track of each other even in a small town. It happens easier than you'd think. Mike sounds like your friend Johnson wants to catch up. You two should grab a beer or coffee sometime. Don't let different work schedules be the reason you drift apart. Good luck reconnecting. I hope Mike gets in touch with you soon. Now, we have one more letter. Short one. Pie contest rematch next year? That one's from Sheriff Dawes. Ha! Yes, Sheriff. I think Danny would be happy to defend his title. Though I have to say, second place this year is nothing to be ashamed of. 4.5 minutes for a whole pie is impressive. But there's always next year, and I'm sure the whole town would love to see a rematch. That's the letters for tonight. Let me tell you one quick thing about apples, and then we'll wrap up. Let's talk about Granny Smith apples. You've all seen them. Bright green, very tart. The apple you reach for when you're baking a pie or making applesauce. They're one of the most recognizable apple varieties out there, and they've got an interesting origin story. Granny Smith apples are named after a real person, Maria Ann Smith, who lived in Australia in the 1860s. She was known as Granny Smith by her neighbors, and she had a small orchard near Sydney. The story goes that in 1868, Maria found a seedling growing in her garden near where she'd been discarding French crab apples. She propagated the seedling, and it produced these bright green, very tart apples that were different from anything else around. They were crisp, they kept well, and they had this distinctive sharp flavor. Maria started sharing the apples with her neighbors, and people loved them, especially for cooking. After she died in 1870, local farmers continued growing the variety, and it spread throughout Australia. By the 1890s, Granny Smith apples were being exported to England. By the 1900s, they'd made it to America. Now they're everywhere. You can find Granny Smith apples in pretty much every grocery store in the country. They're the go-to apple for baking because they're so tart and they hold their shape well when cooked. That tartness comes from high acid content, which also means they brown more slowly than other apples when you cut them. Useful if you're making a fruit salad or apple slices for kids. They're also harvested late in the season, usually October or November, which means they're one of the last fresh apples available before winter really sets in. So next time you're baking an apple pie or making applesauce and you reach for a Granny Smith, remember Maria Ann Smith in her garden in Australia in 1868, finding a strange green seedling and deciding it was worth keeping. One woman's curiosity gave us an apple variety that's been around for nearly 140 years and shows no signs of going anywhere. That's your apple fact for tonight. We're settling into November now, and the next big thing on the calendar is Thanksgiving, Thursday, November 22nd, about 3 weeks away. After that, it's December and Christmas and the end of the year. Time moves fast once we get past Halloween. Before you know it, we'll be talking about New Year's Eve. But that's still a few weeks off. For now, we're just in November. And that's fine. Quiet nights, cold weather, time to stay inside and appreciate being warm. This is my favorite time of year for that reason. No pressure to be anywhere or do anything. Just exist and be comfortable. I'll be back next Sunday, November 11th, with more news, more letters, more stories. Until then, stay warm, be kind to each other, and if you've still got Halloween candy lying around like I do, pace yourself. Thank you for listening tonight. Thank you for writing in. Thank you for being part of this. This is Eddy Franklin, and you've been listening to Blackpine After Dark on KBPN 104.7 FM. Good night, Blackpine.